Okay, guys, so usually we're not doing playoff predictions this early, but we know that Clippers-Mavs is going to be the 4-5 matchup in the West. The odds are that the Clippers will have home court advantage, but there's a very slight chance that Dallas could get the 4th seed. And that does matter, but it doesn't change my pick for the series. Here we go again, man. Luka versus Kawhi and PG Part 3, with now Kyrie and Harden being here and the post-trade deadline Mavs, who got bigger, more athletic, and better defensively. The Clippers had that 30-game run that went insane. We all know that Kawhi in the playoffs just goes to a totally different level. So it should be a good time, unless you're a fan of either of these teams, in which case you're probably going to be sweating a bit. Derek Lively has been dealing with a knee thing. We will see there, of course, Gafford is their starting 5, and Kawhi has also been dealing with some knee stuff as well. Everything around it doesn't seem like there's room to panic. Of course, we do remember what happened in that round 1 series last year against Phoenix, where Kawhi was amazing, and then after game 2, it was like, well, I guess he's just not coming back, and so let's just hope, man. Obviously, if that ends up going south, then I don't know, do I take the video down? Do I just make a new video? I don't know. Let's start with the Clippers guarding the Mavericks, and probably go about 4 or 5 minutes on this one, then we go to the other side. As far as the matchups go, so looking at the games that these teams have played this year, which, by the way, at that time, because they were a while ago now, Dallas's roster was very different, but you did have Terrence Mann guarding Luka most of the time, and then with Mann out, they actually had Russ on him for some possessions, and then PJ Tucker for 2. Now, with that said, the Clippers have given Kawhi and PG those tougher defensive assignments earlier in games recently. So, in the Pacers game, PG was on Halliburton most of the time. In the Blazers game, Kawhi was on Simons in the first half. In the Sixers game, Kawhi was on Maxey in the first half. And then usually in the second half, it'd be more Terrence Mann or more like Amir Coffey or something. So I guess we will see, how often do PG or Kawhi guard Luka? For what it's worth, in the one game they've played this year where Luka and Kyrie were healthy, Paul George was on Kyrie and Mann was on Luka. So there you go. And of course, switching and flow of the game, everybody's going to end up guarding everybody at some points. But now, what are the Clippers going to do with Zubats on pick and rolls with Luka? Because we saw that one playoff matchup where when they started out with Zubats switching onto Luka, trying to keep their defense out of rotation, Luka went Superman mode whenever he had Zoo switched onto him, right? They want to bring 2 to the ball. Do you want to drop? Do you want to have sort of a hedge and then recover thing with the idea of you're going to help off of PJ Washington or Derek Jones Jr., because those 2 have been starting for a while now with Dallas, or Dante Exum, because he's been playing a good amount of minutes, or Maxi Kleber, who's also playing a good amount of minutes. We will see. They are definitely going to dare those guys to beat them from outside. But of course, listen, PJ, he's got the catch and go stuff. He's got the cutting stuff. The Mavericks also can have him screening for Luka as well. Dante Exum in a recent Kings game hit the dagger 3 where they were putting 2 to the ball on Luka and he was left wide open. We've seen, as far as Kleber, I know there was that one playoff run where he had a stretch of games where it felt like he couldn't miss from 3. In general, Kleber, he's not a guy who's just hoisting threes up there, and even then he's been an okay shooter for the past few years. So we'll see. And if I didn't mention Derek Jones and all that, they're going to dare him as well. Of course, you cannot leave Kyrie open, and we will talk about Kyrie in a second, but, to get to the bigs as well, Lively, we'll see what his minutes and all that is with the injury, but he was getting better throughout the year at, if the defense was putting 2 to the ball on Kyrie or Luka, and he was left open in the middle of the floor, he could put the ball on the floor and make something happen at the rim or make the next play to somebody. Now, again, Gafford is still the starter. And then, of course, you've got the threat of Gafford on lobs and rolls. Luka and Kyrie with 2 lob threats, man, it's just scary stuff. Because, of course, Luka will just make the right pass every time. He's got to make the skip. He's got to make the lob if you're dropping or whatever it might be. He'll put his defender in jail and then get to his floaters and all of his push shots that he shoots 70% on around the paint. Within all of his step backs that are going to happen, of course, too. We'll see with Josh Green as well. He had an injury at the end of the season, but he played their very last game. While his 3-point rate is not super high, his percentages have been good for the past couple of years. Speaking of all that, we will see Tim Hardaway's minutes, and this is going to be kind of similar for Norm Powell as well, where if Jason Kidd feels like the Clippers are having a little too much freedom with playing off of guys and you need to throw Hardaway in there more and just lean more offense, sometimes that's what you got to do. The one caveat to that being that Hardaway has not been lighting it up lately. We'll just put it like that with his shooting splits. Of course, you're not going to be able to help off of Kyrie when Luka's running all of his actions. We will see how often they get into screening for each other, either which way, really. Again, in the one matchup where they faced Kyrie and Luka this year, the Clippers started with PG on Kyrie. And so as far as Kyrie cooking in one-on-ones, that's of course the first thing. But the second thing I think would just be the way that Kyrie has made the Mavs just play a little faster, have a little more urgency in the half court, pushing it a little bit more in transition. And as we know, the Clippers' transition defense has been a bit of a problem this year. If that's going to be a problem versus Kyrie, who's going to look to just jet it up court whenever he can, then the Clippers are going to have a really tough time in the series. So that just needs to be good. And then the next thing I would ask is, I mean, it kind of goes along with the Luka stuff. Like, how are they going to look to try to guard Kyrie's screen actions? Because while you do not want Kyrie just dribbling into pull-up jumpers all day or able to get enough daylight around the screen to where he can then go to his limitless dribble package to try to get the big off balance and finish inside or make a kick out to whoever, it's also like, if we're already bringing extra attention to Luka, do we also want to do it to Kyrie? Because they both deserve it, but can our defense handle that? I don't know. I'm going to do this whole spiel, and the Clippers are just going to switch everything. Of course, the Clippers could try going small, which in that then you're really leaning on like a switch-heavy defense. The last thing is I do wonder if the Mavs will try to just go into put Harden in an action whenever we can mode. Now, the Clippers do switch a good amount on and off the ball, so I don't know if you're going to be able to get Harden just running around the floor and having to make crazy rotations all the time, but if you can try to tire him out and also pressure him on the other end, which we'll get into in a little bit, then it's an idea. Let's go to the other side of the floor here. Let's think about how the Mavericks are going to try to guard the Clippers, and of course, Dallas's defense has been really good lately. They got bigger and more athletic after the deadline, some of that being with Kleba coming back as well. And then they're also trying to have like Derrick Jones Jr. or Dante Exum pressure the ball early in possessions as far as the matchups. So P.J. Washington in the Suns game, which was like his 4th or 5th game as a Mav. He was on Kevin Durant, and their last game against Miami, he was on Jimmy. And so I'm guessing he's got the Kawhi matchup. And let's not forget that playoff Kawhi can go to levels that very few guys can. I mean, we saw what he was doing to the Suns before he went down in the round 1 matchup last year. We saw what he did to Dallas to drag the Clippers out of the 2-0 hole and eventually win the series, where he just hit so many top-of-the-key jump shots over Dorian Finney-Smith. I don't remember exactly what game it was. And, of course, his 1 year with the Raptors. And then, of course, you're just going to have all the pull-up twos, and you're going to see the fades. You're going to see the occasional like off-ball action. I mean, probably a little more for PG, but still Kawhi's been running that a bit where Harden can throw him the ball there. I'm assuming that we're going to see playoff Kawhi again, where he just goes nuclear. Which is why then the question of how often are we going to see him on like Luka or Kyrie on the other end, it's just like, well, he has to do so much on offense for you. You know, like he can handle it defensively, but also given what he's got to do on the other end for you. So we'll see. Before we talk about PG and Harden, I actually want to talk about Norm Powell for a little bit. So Powell for this season is averaging about 26 minutes a game. And of course, your main guys' minutes always go up in the playoffs, but I wonder if Powell's minutes are going to have to go kind of crazy for some of these games because, I mean, look, he's over 40% of 5 threes a game this season. And the drives off the catch are good as well. And so I do think that if Dallas is able to help a little more aggressively off of somebody like Terrence Mann, who definitely has value, don't get me wrong, but will the Clippers feel like, yeah, we got to get, a little more juice on offense in there? Because, I mean, the lineup of Kawhi, PG, Harden, Zoo, and Powell has an offensive rating of 121 for the season. That's a very big number. I will get to Russ, but let's just talk PG and Harden for a bit. In the matchup from November, you had Kyrie on Harden. Well, starting the game on Harden, you had Derrick Jones on Paul George. Again, like they've had Dante Exum or Derrick Jones pressuring ball handlers, and so I could definitely picture them being like, yo, just go make James Harden's life really annoying as he brings the ball up for a few minutes. And as far as Kyrie defensively, I mean, look, if Luke is going to be on Terrence Mann, which is what I'm going to assume, then if the centers are guarding each other, at that point it's PG, Kawhi, or Harden. Kyrie's going to have to be on one of them. And I think it's already safe to assume PJ Washington's on Kawhi. So, like, that's just what it is. For what it's worth, I think Kyrie against guards is okay on defense. Yes, he had that one game like 2 years ago when he locked up Harden when Harden was on Philly. And of course, if either team goes small, then everything goes out of whack at that point on who guards who. Of course, we will see just how often Harden is getting downhill. Going to still be running a lot of screen actions. It's just in some of the games leading up to the playoffs, and I talked about this in a previous video, there have just been a lot of times where Harden is just not getting downhill as much as you'd really like him to, even if he's still making all of the passes that he needs to make for them. And a lot of the time that's off of the Zubat screens, of course. Now, in the case of PG, I do find myself wondering a little more, what are we going to see the most of from him in this thing, where it's like, is PG going to try like hell to get Kyrie switched onto him? Which I imagine Kawhi might also try to do. We'll talk about Luka on defense in a second here. Are we going to see PG just go more ISO on, I mean, again, they started that one game with Derrick Jones on him. We would have to see what it would be in this one. Are we going to see more just like the down screens all day for him, off-ball actions? Like, I don't know. I mean, I think with Harden, you're going to see a lot of pick and rolls. I think with Kawhi, you're going to see like a little bit of the off-ball stuff, but a whole lot of like pound the rock, let me get to my spot, and then rise up for this jumper that you're not going to deal with. Whereas with PG, I think they're going to try to find the thing that Dallas has the most trouble dealing with against PG, whether it's like a screen action, whether it's the off-ball stuff. And maybe you just lean into that. I don't know. The biggest thing really with the Clippers is like, you just don't want them walking the ball up court, taking like an extra 3 or 4 seconds to get into the set, and then by the time something's really happening, there's like 7 seconds left and nothing's really happened, and then it's PG just sort of idling at the 3-point line, even if you can make some of those shots and all that. Similar to Harden, we will see if the Clippers try to make a point of going at Kyrie and Luka defensively. I mean, with Kyrie, it would be more so trying to get him switched onto PG or Kawhi for the size difference. In the case of Luka, it's just making him work in general. And I mean, I think Kyrie's fine guarding guys of similar size to him, and Luka's made improvements from where he was defensively years ago. But still, we'll see if they make him work more. And finally, let's talk about Russ. The Clippers have needed Russ to just give them jolts of energy at times this season, where he comes in off the bench and then it's just he's attacking the glass, he's pushing it in transition every opportunity he gets. Dallas is going to dare him to make threes, I assume. And so with that, it's, well, between whether he takes them and makes them, as well as drives or cuts, or they run screen actions for him to counter the space they're giving him. So yeah, I probably missed something. I don't know. Kawhi's going to run pick and rolls. We'll see if it's 2 on the ball. We'll see if it's a drop. We'll see if it's, hedge and recover. Similar thing with Harden. Anyway, who am I picking? I think I'm going Dallas, man. I think it's going to be a long series. I would not be surprised if we get a Game 7. I cannot just shake out of my head the fact that I think this is the type of team that Luka has got to have around him. He's got the defenders. He's got Kyrie. He's got the lob threats. Again, we'll see with Lively's health. And sure, this Dallas team does still have guys that you can dare to leave open, but it's Kyrie and Luka, man. And as for the Clippers, that 30-game run they went on was nuts. And the chemistry they had on offense and everything was great. Just enough ball and player movement and just enough urgency on top of the methodical approach to all 3 of their best players and the way they like to operate in the half court. But that was a bit ago now. I mean, it feels wrong for either one of these teams to be out in round 1, but it's like, that's the Western Conference for you, man.